Live. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you're at on the island of Misfit Toys. It's me, Dreadnonk Ryan, and I'm here again with a very special guest, one of my very good buddies. It's Ken from Toy Connection, and today we're going to talk about the dark side of Duke, the after action report. Welcome back to the island, Ken.
I appreciate being invited on. Thanks for having me once again.
I had to. I know we've talked about this, the dark side of Duke. I blame you for getting me into the Devil's Due GI Joe comics. I went through the run. I believe was 43 issues. It was
Yeah.
completely hooked. Just an amazing run, and I know there's more afterwards, which we'll have to come back and talk to. But again, this was just one of those great videos.
I hugely appreciate not only you saying that, but I remember when I was in the premiere and there were a few people on, and then you jumped on. And about 30 seconds later, I had a new patron in my Patreon named Ryan Sweeney, which I thought was freaking awesome. Like, oh, this is the video that got him in. I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool.
With me, it's put my money where my mouth is, and when you do great content, and I am a huge Joe fan, but when you do things that make me think, or you challenge some of my beliefs and you can back it up with well thought out stories and content, it's easy to go, I want to support somebody like that because I know that they're going to put the time and effort in to put out quality products. So easiest subscription I've done for any type of Patreon.
Well, I mean, wow, that's definitely flattering. And I gotta ask, were you a Duke fan before this?
So, you, growing up, I never had the Duke figure, because I think with every kid it was hit or miss for GI Joe. But
Yep.
through the cartoon, yes, I had the Flint figure, and when Flint came to the Sunbow series, I became more of a Flint fan.
Hmm?
But I think to me, Duke is Superman and Flint is Batman. So when you
That's
have,
totally fair.
and it's not that they're Duke is the all American boy, always does right. It's just who his character is. Where Flint's kind of that rough around the edges type of character. But um, what IDW did with Duke was just amazing. It's what you could see would happen to that all American boy who goes into the military special forces, gets recruited by the CIA, and that kind of just turns him into a different person. He's more cynical. He's willing to make sacrifices just to get the end results that he needs.
You know what else is really cool about this Devil's Due run is at the time I had barely read, and I still haven't read enough of the Larry Hama run. I almost read it like it was a continuation of the Sunbow cartoon. And a few people in my comments, like Chris Mewa from Chasing 80s, he actually said something to the effect of, wow, I didn't know this is what happened to Duke after the Sunbow cartoon. This is really interesting. And I never stopped to correct him to say, oh, by the way, this is actually after the Larry Hama comics, because it could be read very much like a post Sunbow type of series when you're going through Devil's Due. I mean, yeah, there's some characters that have died, but that's reasonably explainable. So yeah.
And the way that I liked with the Sunbow series, they always made Cobra leadership out to look like buffoons. And I get it; it's a kids' TV show, and you have to make the bad guys look like idiots and the good guys look good. They're always going to win. The cart in the I should say the comic book under Larry, Mr. Larry Hama, Cobra Commander was more vicious. And
Yes.
I think if you want to get over that terrorist organization, you have to have that viciousness. The Cobra Commander, it will do anything to gain power.
Yes.
And what will happen is, even if somebody is such a good person like Duke was, to fight that type of enemy, you have to become that enemy, which means you
Yep.
have to do what they would do so that you can make sure your side will win.
Yep. So tap into your dark side, for lack of a better term, which is what we've done here. So
Yeah.
yeah, this Devil's Due run is beyond underrated, and I wanted to do more to cover it. Like I basically covered Duke, and I've covered a bit about Kamakura. Otherwise, there's a lot more for me to go over on this.
Well, even Hawk has changed and is more unsure of himself, unsure of the sacrifices that he's made. With the Devil's Due, it really it makes it seem like a lot of these Joes are reassessing the choices that they made, and if actually joining GI Joe was worth it.
100%. And this plays out, and I'm not going to spoil the end result for anybody, but this plays out even when Flint and Lady J are looking at, what could life be like after the military, after Joe, and that's a key part of the series as well. So yeah, 100% what you're saying. I'm feeling it.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do is we're actually going to play parts of Ken's video, The Dark Side of Duke, and we're going to let it roll. And then what we're going to do is kind of like the walking people who are zombie videos, so we don't get copyright strike. But just come back, and then we're going to talk about what we cover. So sit back, enjoy, and if you are not a subscriber to Ken's channel, I will include it into the link of the video. Uh, but please go out and check it out. It's not just GI Joe; it's pretty much everything under the sun. Transformers,
Mm,
Action Force, uh,
wrestlers.
He-Man, wrestlers. Our favorite pastime, talking wrestling.
Big
But let's
time.
get started.
We've all been introduced to many leading heroic faces during the glory days of the Saturday morning cartoon era. Depending on your tastes, we all preferred some heroes more than others, but the common trait among these franchises is that these individuals led the forces of good against the forces of evil. While he was treated as a leading poster boy throughout most of Sungo Animation's G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero cartoon, Sergeant Conrad S. Howser, also known as Duke, was also an important character in the comics, but served more as a member of an ensemble cast there rather than being an outright leading frontman. Now, whether you prefer the Boy Scout nature of the original cartoon or the tough as nails sergeant he was shown as being in the Marvel comic run, I'm here to talk about an early 2000s change to the character and deep dive into the dark side of Duke during the Devil's Due Publishing comic series. Stay tuned.
Probably pause here. Yeah. So that was the intro. Just the opening part of it there. So what I really wanted to do was kind of set the stage there and kind of cut back and forth and say, here he is in all his like crazy camo at the end there, and he doesn't look like Duke anymore. But cut back and show that like smiling baby face that we know from the Sunbow cartoon, and establish that all the leading characters of the 80s had a certain vanilla feel to them. They do what's right. They are morally unflawed, and we accept that about them. But 20 years goes by, and society changes, whether it's the grunge era ushering in a new rebellious era, whether it's the rise of the anti-hero or whatever, or the influence of the Wolverines and the Deadpools and the Punishers of the world. But our heroes need to evolve too, and that's what I wanted to articulate in that introduction.
Absolutely. The 80s heroes were all perfect,
Mm-hmm.
but real heroes aren't perfect.
That's correct. Now, I've had at least one person tell me that my intros are a bit lengthy and it's just a little bit of filler. And I'm like, you know what, though? What am I supposed to do? Am I just supposed to jump in and be like, yo, Duke had some bad times. Let's talk about that. Yeah, they were pretty bad. Okay, see you later. Like, there's nothing I can do about that, right? Like, may as well tell the story the way you would want to see it in a documentary.
You've got to have a hook to make people go, "Oh, I like this." You
Mm-hmm.
That's what got me, right? So when I saw the hook, this is the story I'm going to tell you. This is where it starts. This is where it's going to
Yes.
go. It makes me want to stay and watch it.
Well, and you know what I like
So
about that is I did the best hook I could given my skill set, but this intro itself is a whole nother hook that was donated by Corbra Lang using his skill set. So if you want to go on about the intro a bit more, I'm definitely here to talk about that, but otherwise I'm good to play Cobra's fantastic intro.
all right, let's do this. Now, Cobra Lane does have a YouTube channel, and I will also include that in the show description notes. Okay, I've got a mark out for that because that was my childhood.
Yep.
That was awesome.
Yep. And
That
the
was
yeah, the video intro got as many comments because it was the first time I aired it. It got as many comments as the rest of the video did itself. And I was gonna air this intro initially as part of my Transformers Year One 1984 video, and I realized, no, you know what? Cobra put so much work in for me, and he's a Joe guy. And as much as he can appreciate the other toy lines, this deserves to be aired as part of a G.I. Joe video. And I told him, Cobra, let's air it right here. And he was appreciative of that. And he put so much into it. Like, look how much time that took.
yeah, and it was he. If you you got me just sputtering now. The stuff that he does on his channel is amazing. I don't have the patience to do stop motion. The fact that he can do that and lay it out and then add in the special effects after, it's like what, a minute or so, maybe a minute and a half, but that probably took him like hours to make. It was
Oh, it did.
awesome.
It did. The only thing I did was put in this end screen, the initial title screen that said Toy Connections Presents, and then I chose the music. Everything in between, 99.999% of the work was done by him for this introduction. Like that's talent. That's raw talent that cannot be quantified right there. And he doesn't know this yet. I imagine this video will air that because he's coming on my channel in about 12 hours, and he doesn't know this yet. But when I do my intro, normally I have that rock and roll intro when I have him on my channel, and I do the opening video to kind of introduce the Toy Connections online. I'm gonna roll this intro instead, and I'm gonna tell everybody how great it is, and I'm gonna say everybody who saw that, subscribe.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
just, uh, it, it, it,
Yeah,
it
I
ties so well to your channel. And it reminds me of the opening of the G.I. Joe movie,
mm-hmm.
where it's just like, this is awesome. And, it's part of that hook. It's just part of that
Yep.
hook.
So the way this video was structured is I have that opening hook that kind of gets you going, ooh, that's that intro. I wonder where we're going to go. And then I have this secondary hook, which isn't just a quick theme song. It even ramps you up even further. And you're just like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to get into, the rest of it. But I'll tell you this, like the rest of this, there's no stop motion. I could not do what Corey does. And I mean, as far as he's concerned, I think his channel is highly underrated. Like, I don't know if he has 600 or 700 subscribers, but the thing is, stop motion takes him so long that he can't do, like, if he's only doing stop motion, he's only releasing every few months. And then the algorithm doesn't catch him the way it should. So I'm trying to bring attention to his channel in a way that's like, it's worth the wait, even when he does do a video, even if it's only every few months. And I was talking to him a while ago, sometime last year, and I said, you may want to intersperse like individual reviews in between. Even if it's not your bread and butter, but you have a figure you want to talk about, use that to tide the algorithm over in between these amazing stop motion videos. And as long as you want to, Corey, but I know there's got to be a figure out there you're passionate about, or 20 figures or 100 figures. And you could just do 4-minute videos on those and keep those in between the stop motions. And he's like, that's a great idea. And he's been doing a little bit more, which is great.
Yeah, it's hard when you're new, and you've been a great help to me. I'm stubborn, and I know what I want to do. And I'm listening to you and Zazel from Slaughterhouse Championship Wrestling, and my buds from A Toy Kind of Mood, and it's making me to think about what I'm doing, how I'm doing, and why I'm doing it. But you're right. You have to put some content out there, just not when you feel like it. And that yeah. But his stuff is amazing. Still just amazing. All right, so let's hit the play button.
At the time of this video, I am aware that Wild Devils Due Publishing's 2001 to 2008 comic run was originally written as a follow-up to Larry Hama's epic 155-issue Marvel series. The Devils Due comics are no longer considered canon, having been superseded by the more recent IDW comic releases. For me personally, though, this does little to nothing to deter how much DDP's run meant to me, and I've gotten used to some epic stories either being intended as alternate continuity to begin with, such as DC's Kingdom Come, or other examples such as the Star Wars Thrawn book trilogy starting off as official canon, only to be replaced by Disney's own storylines later on. Note that I have covered other DDP-related topics, such as my deep dive into the character of Snake Eyes' apprentice Kamakura, so do check out that video if you have a few spare moments. So as I mentioned a second ago, whether you prefer Duke as the vanilla babyface in his original animated form, or a slightly more hard-nosed character as written by Larry Hama initially, either way, he was a mostly by-the-books type of soldier. By that I mean he was a man who could follow orders, primarily kept a clean record, and fit the 1980s stereotype of a battle-hardened, idealistic field commander and role model. This, however, takes a considerable change as we head into the 21st century during the Devil's Due publishing series. In storyline at the time, G.I. Joe had been disbanded for several years, having been officially decommissioned in 1994, but reinstated in 2001 as Cobra's activities began to resurge. As expected, the reformed G.I. Joe team consists largely of the same cast, minus several individuals who died in battle during the previous Larry Hama run. Naturally, Duke is again among the cast of main characters, though this time he's seen in a black suit every bit as often as he's seen in his traditional combat gear. Once,
I just want to stop here because I think you framed this beautifully. So you have this scene from the comic book where it shows, Zartan, Dr. Mindbender, Major Blood, Firefly, and then there's Duke standing there.
Yes.
And in the black suit, and it's almost like, what's the difference between those guys on the screen and Duke standing in front of it?
Absolutely. And notice the big thing I mentioned there is that he's seen in a black suit more often, if not, well, about as much, if not more often as being in his combat gear. I mean, that's got to tell you something's different, right?
Well, and even the frame before that, where he looked like he was on the mission, it was like you said, in a black suit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, but again, great choice of framing this. Just amazing.
Seemingly subtle change early on, but becomes important, is that he's often referred to as Agent Hauser rather than the more familiar military acknowledgement of Sergeant Hauser. This is quite noteworthy because what is explained to us is that Duke largely disappeared from existence during the 7 years of G.I. Joe's inactivity. We are told that Duke took an off the books covert assignment as a Black Ops agent, and his experiences during this time are shrouded in a level of mystery that he isn't allowed to speak of. All in all, there seems to be a dark side added to the character, an edginess with how he acts and talks to others, and it becomes clear throughout the series that some level of trauma has shaped Duke into a different individual than the Joes we're familiar with years earlier. The most obvious example of this occurs between issues number 28 and 31 of the DDP run that I mentioned, where Duke takes matters into his own hands to secure the capture of the famed Cobra arms dealer known as Destro. What had happened here is that Destro had orchestrated a small war between neighboring storyline South American countries known as Sierra Gordo and Sierra Muerte. Destro had tried to turn the two nations against one another by having his own mercenaries pose as invaders from Sierra Muerte, crossing the border to Sierra Gordo, all while Destro had offered to pay an armed service to Sierra Gordo to protect them and rout off the apparent invaders. Of course, as I've implied here, Destro was inciting a war where he controlled both sides in order to benefit himself financially. However, prior to all this, General Hawk had dispatched a small group of his own Joes to monitor the situation in Sierra Gordo, namely Recondo, Tunnel Rat, Lowlight, Ripcord, and a new recruit named Dart. Bear in mind that this appeared to be strictly a surveillance mission from what I could tell through reading, as this is a pretty small force and not significant enough to be involved in any real open field battles. Now, while all this was going on, Duke had somehow actually been in contact with the leaders of both Sierra Gordo and Sierra Muerte, and together uncovered Destro's plan to benefit financially while pretending to help, but effectively manipulate both nations. Duke travels to South America unbeknownst to anyone on the Joe team, including General Hawk, and watches the skirmish take place. However, the small Joe group gets caught in the crossfire between the two South American nations. Lowlight and Tunnel Rat are injured, and the young Dart is left traumatized by the experience. In secret, Duke covertly orchestrates a meeting between Destro and the high ranking officials in Sierra Muerte, and then Duke and the president of Sierra Gordo ambush the meeting, unveil that the two nations have been in contact and in cahoots all along with Duke, effectively double crossing Destro and resulting in the capture of Destro. Now, of course, all of this sounds like careful, intelligent planning by Duke, but take a few factors into account. Duke does all this knowing that the small team of Joes in Sierra Gordo would get caught in the crossfire, risking injury or death, and tells no one of his own behind the scenes plan to get involved with the two nations and ensure the capture of Destro. Even General Hawk is left in the dark about Duke's plan, and it's worth noting that Duke travels to South America while on paper appearing to be on an entirely unrelated assignment somewhere else. All of this leads to a key scene during issue number 31, where Duke is at odds with other members of the Joe team. And in a post battle debriefing, he explains his position to Hawk by saying that the battle had to look legit and that he didn't want to tip anyone off, not even the Joes whose lives he had a direct hand in endangering in the field. This, of course, is disappointing news to General Hawk, who naturally doesn't want his own right hand man doing things off the book without assignment from higher up. Things get pretty intense towards the end of this debriefing, and it gets to a point where Whipcord asks if he can speak freely and says to Duke, after the team disbanded, you spent those years in Black Ops doing who knows what. You're not Duke anymore. You're this man that I don't trust and I don't really like. That bothers the hell out of a lot of people these days. It's not just me. Naturally,
Amazing. The Duke from Sunbow would have never have done this.
That's
The
right.
Duke,
Or if he did, it's because he evolved into this, which means he's still no longer Sunbow Duke. That's correct. Um, look at this quote from Ripcord. One of the patrons, Mark Olson, I showed him this quote, and he was kind of like, "Whoa, what could make Ripcord say this?" And I'm like, "Well, something happens to Duke during the comic run." He's like, "You got to tell me." I'm like, "I will. I'll do it the best way I can."
You can tell that the group depended on Duke for his integrity, his honesty, and they trusted him. And he took all of that and threw it away.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't even act sorry about it. He justified it.
He did, 100%. And the one thing I'll take the moment to mention now is the guy who wrote these issues. Well, first, Josh Blaylock, I think, who might be the president of the Devils Do. I think he wrote the first half of this 43 issue run. Midway through, Brandon Giroir takes over. And Brandon Giroir, I didn't know this. He's a friend of Carson. So when Carson mentioned it, I'd already done this video. I messaged Brandon Giroir and said, "Look, Brandon, I know we don't know each other, but if you have time, you might enjoy this video. You have no obligation to watch whatsoever, but I did this analysis on Duke." A few days later, he responded back saying, "Wow, I've never seen anyone take a deep dive into this," and how he thoroughly enjoyed it, and how he's going to go back and watch the Kamakura one after the fact. So I took that as a huge, huge compliment, because these issues 28 to 31 that I'm covering in the first half of this video, those are the ones he wrote, right? So it was the biggest compliment I could have gotten. That the actual writer for this part of the series appreciated the deep dive.
And I think sometimes the writers don't understand how obsessed we fans can be about this,
Not
or
at all.
how we envision these characters. And when you see this type of growth from Duke, good, bad, or indifferent, it just shows what the total cost of all of those years of fighting Cobra, to being disbanded, to now being brought back. There's things that he's willing to do now to win.
Yes, very good way of
and
putting it, Ryan. Very good way
and
of summarizing
and it includes sacrificing his own teammates, treating them like pawns to win this 3D chess game with Cobra.
Absolutely.
So brilliant job so far. Not just blowing smoke, but I just absolutely love this video.
Truly, Duke is cold, unreceptive, and standoffish in his response, and when Flint implies to Duke that he has become no better than Cobra themselves, Duke realizes he's heard enough, grabs Flint, and dares the warrant officer to start a fight with him. Flint is about to retaliate before they are separated by General Hawk, and Duke eventually storms out of the room, once again out of sight. As a side note, in the issues immediately following this, General Hawk receives some long-term injuries in a fight with Cobra Commander, leaving Duke to assume command of the Joe team in the interim. Now, I know there's a lot to unpack from what I just said, but I'm about to dive deeper, so get ready. I was so fascinated with the edginess and somewhat dark tone to what I had always known to be a stereotypical Captain America hero type of character. At the time I had read these stories in the early 2000s, I was so curious I had to dig around for some more backstory regarding Duke's days in Black Ops and find out a bit more about what evolved him into the character he became. All of this led me to a story arc that was written as part of the G.I. Joe Frontline series that was running concurrently with the Devil's Due main G.I. Joe title run in the same comic era. Issues 5 through 8 of G.I. Joe Frontline dives heavily into Duke's first Black Ops mission shortly after the 1994 disbandment of the G.I. Joe team. The opening issue of this particular story arc shows Duke summoned into General Hawk's office, where Hawk mentions a mission from several years ago called Operation Coldfire. Note here that Operation Coldfire is classified to the level that Hawk has to ask Duke point blank if he was part of that mission, since Hawk himself doesn't really know anything about it. Duke responds with surprise, noting that the clearance level of Operation Coldfire is so high that he's shocked to even hear about it years later. Take note of the situation. The details of the assignment were even above General Hawk's head, showing the depth of the Black Ops secrecy that was involved. Duke admits that he was indeed part of that operation, which consisted of a plan to rescue a group of scientists in a remote, cold area of Norway who had just sent out a distress signal. In flashback sequences, it is shown that these scientists were attempting to experiment with developing a cold weather type soldier in a research facility where they had mixed polar bear DNA with human DNA. The experiments go wrong, and the scientists effectively infect themselves to the point that they become animalistic and bloodthirsty, inadvertently rendering the research facility completely useless. During these flashback sequences, Duke goes in with a team of covert operatives, not knowing what to expect, and find themselves attacked by these mutated animalistic beings, aka the scientists whose experimental work had gone wrong. Some of Duke's comrades are brutally and mercilessly killed to the point that one injured soldier even begs Duke to put a bullet through his own head to avoid being killed in vicious fashion by their predators. Of note, the scene cuts away here, and it's not clear if Duke actually has to do the deed and kill his own man. But if he does, it further adds to the dark side trauma he's been somewhat plagued and subject to. By the end of the mission, Duke has to blow up all the entrances to the science facility to seal it off and set off flares for help. He is shown dragging his last surviving colleague out of the research facility and into the snow and watches as his colleague perishes in the snow from injuries. As such, Duke remains the only survivor from this Operation Coldfire mission. Now, all of this goes a long way to explain why Duke is the way he is when the team assembles, and like how Ripcord mentions, his fellow Joes barely even recognize him anymore. This backstory goes a long way to also establish Duke's erratic, unpredictable, and less compassionate behavior in the present timeline. For the purposes of this video, that's about
It broke Duke.
Yep.
And the fact that it didn't show you what happened, I think adds to the story. Sometimes less is more.
Especially in a dark tone type of story. And I do want to point out, because you did the right thing when you started by reading the first 43 issues of the main run. And I know we've talked about the America's Elite sequel series, but this G.I. Joe Frontline series, I think it's 16 issues. It's kind of a parallel. It's kind of like when they did the special missions run in addition to the Larry Hama run in the 80s. I think it was called that. Wasn't there a G.I. Joe special missions
Yes.
that ran concurrently? Yes, that's what the Frontline series was supposed to be, and that's where this story is.
It's I think honestly, this Devil's Due run is very underrated. I know there's the hardcore Joe fans who like it, but again, it's one of those things where it's an amazing story, and I get the whole, well, it's not canon. I don't care about that. It's a story that makes me love these characters that I've known since my youth, and instead of them being two-dimensional, they are now three-dimensional.
Yes, and
You,
on top of all that, sorry, do you have something else to add to that?
no, it's just Duke is now more relatable.
He is, and um, the thing about this is, when I tried to look up reviews for this particular 4-issue series, I couldn't find anything. And the stuff that I could find was people saying, well, it plays out like your average horror mission. It's kind of an average book. And I'm like, no, you're missing the point. Whoever reviewed this by itself wasn't looking at the rest of the IDW run and how it ties in. Like, no one had thought to tie in that issue at Sierra Gordo from the issues that Brandon Jerwa wrote, with the backstory of how Duke became that way by going back to 6 or 7 years before that mission, when he did his first Black Ops mission with the scene in Norway there. No one had thought to tie those together, but it's such a beautiful thing when you tie it together, and to see that Duke is the one that has to make those Black Ops decisions. There's so much depth that was overlooked and was not tied together to the main run, that I was like, this is being hugely underserved. And I'm like, I need to bring this to the conscience of our fellow fans. They deserve to know how good it was. They deserve to appreciate Duke as more than just your prototypical high school quarterback. And as for this run, as for it not being canon, I mean, IDW might not be canon anymore after a while when publishing rights changes. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Gaz will probably watch this, but his favorite Superman story he admitted to us is Kingdom Come. That's not a canon story, or it's not, at least it's not in the main Earth story. And that original Thrawn trilogy by Star Wars is no longer canon. So canon doesn't matter as much as it used to. And this series just came out at the wrong time. It was a 2000. The whole Devil's Due run was 2001 to 2008. And as you know, look, a lot of series couldn't catch fire around that time. Like, the 2000 X Motu run, right, Ryan?
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things that's said in The Toys That Made Us is that as good as the cartoon was, and as much as the collectors loved the toys, it didn't catch on with kids at the time. So your target audience was a bunch of people in their early 20s who couldn't quite afford toy collecting because the kids who should have been the target audience weren't buying them. And then the adults who were couldn't buy many. And that's the same thing that happened with this Devil's Due run. It was released just a few years too early, in my mind.
And
Does that make sense?
And with comics at that time, that the bottom had fallen out on them.
Mm-hmm.
After the big, I'm going to buy comics because Superman #1 sold for $7 million. I'm exaggerating that, of course, but people
Mm-hmm.
treated it like, I'm going to retire off these comic books, and they lost what made comic books amazing was how they can transport you into that story and hook you
Yes.
along.
Yes.
And with this Devil's Due, I admit it was Marvel for me. And then when I got back into Joe, it was like the idea, oh, what's Larry? Oh, well, I'm going to read all of Larry's stuff. And then I started to find some of the other IDW storylines, and I'm like, oh, this is really good too. And, oh, and this one's amazing too. It's okay to have different runs. It doesn't have to be continuous for the stories. Throw different stuff out there because you'll find something that you like. And the best thing about comic books and these stories is they're not going away, right?
They're not.
They're going to be
They're
there.
not. And you're right. This was caught in that weird time period where, I mean, I want to say that comics took a bit of an uptick kind of in the early MCU phase, like around that 2008 time frame. Maybe I'm wrong, but I noticed my friends were starting to buy comics again around the time the MCU got big.
Yeah.
And this was in just the wrong time frame. 2001 to 2008, people just weren't looking for Joe stuff. And this was so underserved, right? It was the right people with the right dynamics at the wrong time, is what happened. Right? And I hope Brandon Jerwa and Josh Blaylock and these guys who wrote these issues, and Tim Seeley, I hope they all know that this deserves a second life.
Well, if you are Hasbro and you're looking for something to put on Netflix, something to put on Amazon, on Hulu, you want to get a story that's going to hook people, this is the kind of stuff that will hook people.
Yes.
It's not the look. The MCU works because all of the heroes are flawed. They're relatable.
Mm-hmm.
DC, when you look at even the Snyder verse or whatever, all of the heroes he had are unrelatable to people. Superman is, from another planet, and he's got all these superpowers, and he's perfect. And Bruce Wayne is a millionaire, and you just go on and on and on with all these powers that they had. And when you look at the Marvel, the MCU, Tony Stark, let's just be honest, he's an alcoholic womanizer who has daddy issues. People can relate
Big
to
time.
that. Captain America is a man out of time. Thor is such a blowhard because he's so insecure about who he is.
Mm-hmm.
Hulk is, can't control his anger. All of these characters have relatable features, which makes you want to root for them.
Mm-hmm.
this makes me want to root for Duke. This makes me want to root for the Joe team. Duke understood that these scientists who he's supposed to go and rescue were doing the same type of experiments that Cobra was doing.
That's right.
And they were government sanctioned.
That's right.
And, this happened 6 or 7 years, ago. And it was right after the Joe team disbanded. And you would think that somebody wouldn't want to be on this Black Ops team after all of this happens, but he stayed on it.
That's right.
So
That was his first Black Ops mission. Right.
Yeah,
and that begins the transformation of why you have a more cold-hearted person in the Devil's Due main run.
Because he chose that. He could have walked away at that point, but he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Just amazing. Absolutely amazing. All right.
So as deep as I'm willing to dive into Duke's Devil's Due publishing history here without reading issues in their entirety. But I'll point out something else noteworthy. In the DDP Order of Battle Files comics that came out, which included updated bios for each G.I. Joe character, Duke's rank is now listed as classified. This is actually something that I really like. One thing I noticed as I got older, as many of you have probably also noticed, is that he served all those years as second in command to the G.I. Joe team behind only General Hawk, all while being a master sergeant or a first sergeant. While we know that G.I. Joe is an amalgamation of operatives across multiple military branches, some would note that it is a bit peculiar seeing Duke consistently give out orders to soldiers of clearly higher ranking. Having considered all that, by adding an extended Black Ops background to Duke's history, the DDP writers have clearly, and in my mind, quite effectively sidestepped the aforementioned issue, as he is consistently called Agent Howser rather than Sergeant Howser, with his updated bio noting a classified secret rank, like I said earlier, and it allows us to better accept him as General Hawk's second in command. I, for one, am a huge fan of this, and we are trained in pop culture to give black-suited special agents a bit of reverence and respect. Heck, he's even shown using this off-the-books rank and special level of clearance at times, and I personally think it suits him quite well. Now, as the one who's scripting, editing, and producing this video, I know what my intentions are here, but I hope, and by saying hope, I really hope that I haven't painted Duke in a negative light. My goals here are actually quite the opposite. Yes, as a kid in grade school watching the G.I. Joe cartoon, I needed that smiling cookie cutter type of hero that was meant to be a role model to a target audience. As a young adult in the 2000s, when this particular comic run was in print, what I needed was a significant evolution of the character to suit more contemporary times. That is what I feel Devil's Due Publishing gave us with their handling of the Duke character. All this added depth, expanded backstory, and flawed nature of the character made him way more interesting and intriguing for me. So when looking back over the decades of collecting, I put this particular incarnation of Duke on par and in some ways above my idealistic vision of him from my childhood. So maybe some of you have already read these stories and know about all this. Maybe some of you know this and are glad to join me as I retread some history. Perhaps some of you are hearing it for the first time and are able to share the intrigue with me as I tell this part of Duke's history. No, this part of the story is no longer considered official comic book canon, but it is very much my Duke, my special agent Conrad Howser, and maybe in some ways he can be your vision and version of Duke or Agent Howser in your own acceptance of the character's history. Let me know what you think in the comment section of this video. So that's it for now. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters whose names can be found in the description section of this video. Please visit patreon.com/toyconnection if you're interested in joining the Patreon yourself. And with that, if you enjoyed this deep dive into Duke's character history, please subscribe to this channel, press that like button to spread this video to more viewers, and share it with your friends. Hopefully you had as much fun as I did here, and since knowing is half the battle, you now know this part of the battle. And with that, yo Joe, and take care. I'll see you.
Awesome. And yes, I had to leave that in because I thought it was important. Go check out Ken's Patreon. It's definitely worth it.
Oh, thank you. Yep. Thank you for putting this whole thing together. And I was quite flattered when I heard you wanted to do some form of a after action report or a post show kind of debrief. The one thing that bugged me when I was making this is when I did put in those blurred. Just be honest with me, I had to blur some of the footage, some of the black and white footage. Was that off-putting at all, or did you find it okay?
No, I
Okay.
think it's like going back to where they didn't show if Duke shot that guy. My imagination is worse than what you could have ever showed me, right?
Okay.
So the black and white, I think, just added just that little bit more of, oh, what's going on behind that? Oh, and that I liked it.
Okay. What
I'm
I
simple like
mean
that.
when I did that, what I was talking about was the blur parts of the black and white. Because what happened was I put the stuff in black and white to keep it within fair use. Because I was like, it's not my footage. I'm not using the audio, but I made it black and white. And then I started blurring things after because I got really paranoid because I started hearing things like WWE it happened to me where they start just issuing copyright claims, not strikes, but claims, to ask you to take your video down. And I got worried Hasbro would do the same. So I started blurring 1 second here, 1 second here, 1 second here, just to avoid sort of like the content bots, I guess is what I'm trying to do. Maybe I overdid it, I guess is what I was worried about. Maybe the black and white was fine on its own without blurring a couple seconds here and there. But I'm hearing from you that barely noticed it. It was all about the story, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think changing it to black and white kind of reinforced like the old Western white hat sheriff or cowboy. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the Sunbow. It was, he was John Wayne. And it's the
Mm-hmm.
black and white. It's that two dimension, and then the image comic. Devil's Due shows him in Technicolor. You see all the warts
Mm-hmm.
now. It,
You do.
I loved it. Great contrast.
Well, that thing at the end there that was really important, I thought, was talking about the rank, about how he's not acknowledged by his military rank now. He's being acknowledged by his federal rank, his government agency rank as Agent Howser. And to me, it was so smart. I don't know if it was Brandon Jerwa or Josh Blaylock who thought of it or somebody else on the creative team, but man, I don't know about you, Ryan, but as I got older and started watching the Deke series, I was like, I thought a sergeant was a lot higher in rank. I'm like, oh, that's why Duke's second in command. Sergeant must be right after general. And then I looked it up. I'm like, it's nowhere near. So I started to wonder why they did that, why a master sergeant was always the one giving out orders.
And a lot of that has to do with Larry. He knew that the majority of the men that he had served with in different special forces were sergeants, because at one point, like, to be part of the Green Berets, I believe you had to be a rank of sergeant to be able to basically apply for being a Green Beret. So it made sense for that to do. It made sense for the Joes to be more of enlisted instead of officers.
I agree. It's just that a lot of the characters are lieutenants and captains already, and Duke is very clearly the second in command to General Hawk, which is why I thought, and you make a good point there with Larry. I just think that when they had to evolve it into the 2000s, going with, okay, well, we can't just get rid of his sergeant rank, we can't just magically promote him when GI Joe was off, was decommissioned. We still want to keep him a field guy. Well, what about adding a special agent federal rank to him that's not on the military chain of command, that will still get that level of respect because the Joes are a special force? And I thought, my goodness, that is brilliant. So, because where does agent fall on the military scale? It doesn't. You can put it where you want, especially in a special forces group. So I thought that was just a really brilliant way to get around the ranking structure.
Well, and the CIA does have, it's an SAD group, and they do recruit from special forces.
Mm-hmm.
So the Joe team is the best of the best. They're recruited. So why wouldn't a Black Ops, CIA, Department of Homeland Security, something come after Duke and recruit him, and he goes into a different role where it's still outside of the military, but he can flow back in. It was very smart because he was making decisions outside of General Hawk, and he had higher
Yes.
clearance than what General Hawk did on a lot of stuff.
That's just it, right? And like I think Black Ops is like I know CIA is there, but isn't Black Ops like off the books CIA kind of thing?
Yeah, they're like a special activities division, and
That's
it's
right.
inside the CIA. They're paramilitary. They're the guys who truly. It's what I think G.I. Joe was really based off of. Like, if you remember in some of the IDW comics and different things, you'll hear like, well, we're already dead. Everybody thinks we're dead.
Mhm.
You're not going to get these medals. They don't exist.
And
That's
admittedly,
why they have.
I've only read a few IDW issues, though one of them includes the 4-part Chuckles issue, which which one I'm talking about. It's that one's pretty good. That might be worth a deep dive.
And,
Now
and
that we're
that's even
talking about
in
it.
the Marvel run too. Even in the first few issues where Colonel Hawk is the blonde hair looking guy who turns into Duke. Go
Mhm.
figure. But you've got Stalker who really runs that group. But I think Steeler is like lieutenant, and
Mhm.
Scarlet comes from military intelligence, and so that group always had a different command structure that was outside of normal military ranks. So it always
It
makes me
very much did.
it makes me think that they were something that was off the books, but nobody could explain really what they were, I guess.
Yep. That's definitely true. And like you said, he had a clearance level that was above General Hawk because of his time serving for Uncle Sam. And that just goes to show, like, holy crap, like something serious is going on here, right? And because it's not on General Hawk's immediate purview, because it's not immediately military, it's deep, deep CIA. And it just added such a huge element to the character. And I know, Ryan, you probably haven't read the frontline issues yet, but you see the change in him in the main run, just in the 43 issue main run. You're probably thinking, this is not the Duke I grew up with in neither Sunbow nor Hama's Marvel run.
It isn't, but it's the Duke we needed
Yes,
during the
it's the
time.
Duke we needed all those years later. So, yeah, I mean, um, I, the video itself, while it's performed decently, it's nowhere near my best, highest performing video, but it might be the one that I'm the proudest of because the people I care most about, whether it's you, Zazel, Gaz, Hans, Chris, however many of those guys, Pete, all the guys that commented, Phil, they were all over this one. They're like, oh my God, how did this float under the radar? And that's what I wanted. It gave the impact I wanted. Like, I don't even think it has 400 views on it. Like, generously, it might have 350. But every single one of those views counted. That's what I liked about it. It wasn't just a casual background view, right? Because the number of comments proportional to the views was like, oh my goodness, all you guys watched it, right? And paid
Yeah.
attention. And in some cases, rewound it to be like, wait, what did I miss? So, I mean, a lot of times a video with that number of views only gets a handful of comments. This one it just didn't stop for about a day for comments. So, yeah.
It almost, and as an 80s kid, I always tie different things, but I think of like the movie Predator, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where Carl Weathers' character recruits Arnie and his group to come in to rescue, the Green Berets, where he's actually using them to gather information on basically a terrorist group. He used them, and he like looks at Dutch and he's like, "What do you expect me to do? We needed this information, and I knew you were the only ones who can do it." That's what Duke did to his own people.
Yes.
He used them,
Yes.
and
Big time.
he did it for the right reasons. And for him to be able to make that decision to do that, I don't know if I want to call it the dark side of Duke or if it's more of the realistic side of Duke.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the title was, you probably guessed, it was very much snapped from Dark Side of the Ring. You probably already figured that
Right.
out,
Yeah,
right?
well,
But
the way you framed the whole video, it had that I wanted to say at the beginning. It's like, this reminds me of the Dark Side of the Ring episodes.
but really, what is it? It's the real side of the ring. It's just one market's better than the other. And there will eventually be a Dark Side of Flint video, and most likely a Dark Side of General Hawk video, because these characters go through something of a change during this period.
What happens to
You know what I'm
Flint?
talking about?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
If you haven't read any of these, do it. You can find them hard copy on eBay cheap. Go to your local comic book store. Find any of these that you can. There are so many great stories out there, and what you see happen to all of them, it's the chef's kiss. It's all you can do. Such great writing, such great storytelling. It never got the credit that it should have, because at that time, like you said, it just nobody cared.
Mm-hmm.
God, there's some great stories out there.
And that's why it was a label like Devil's Due that got it. You know, it didn't go to a Marvel or a DC or a mid-sized company like IDW. That's why it was available. And Transformers was the same thing. They went to Dreamwave Productions for a number of years before IDW got them. Right? So it was kind of a property that was living only on nostalgia. And when I eventually do the Dark Side of Flint, the problem is, and one of the reasons I haven't done it, is I have to live up to this video. And it's so hard. And I'm easing myself in by working on an Optimus Prime video right now that's kind of the same thing, but it's not so much a dark side, more so as it is an alternate origin story that I'm kind of working on right now. And I'm kind of using that to ease my way back into trying to live up to the impact I've made on my friends for this video. And I stress the word friends because, you know, you and I talk wrestling all the time. And when when people said, 1,100 people packed that bingo hall, you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
They don't sell like WWE. And Paul E said something to the effect of, we get the respect of each and every single one of those 1,100 people so that they come back. And if 350 people have watched The Dark Side of Duke, well, if I get all 350 people to come back and appreciate what I did the first time, I've done my job. It doesn't have to be viewed by 35,000 people. I'm happy with the 350 that I made the impact on, because it wasn't casual viewership. It was dedicated viewership.
Absolutely understand that. Just do what you do and it will be fine.
Oh, yeah. And you're the ones who told me that.
Don't worry about living up to this, because this is its own thing, right? And you're going to go into Optimus Prime, and the fact that you're worried about it so much tells me you're going to do a phenomenal job.
I think what it is I'm trying to recreate something, but without letting it become its own thing. And it's good that we're saying this now while I'm still in the middle of making that video, because now I can, if I need to go back and recorrect anything, I don't need to follow this exact formula. I can steal elements from it. I can fit what works, but it still needs to become its own thing. So this was productive Because up until now, I was trying to turn that Optimus Prime video into this, but it didn't have the content to be the exact same thing. But it does have an impact to be something else. And yeah, okay. I think you
And
got
I
me
think
thinking.
when you tell this story, I don't want to make it sound like you said, he's vanilla. Now he's got a little chocolate mixed into him. Now he's got a little strawberry. Now he's got a bunch of flavor. He's finally the like I said, the three-dimensional character. When you go to Flint, that's going to be just different from this. So it's just going to be telling that story. And that story alone is going to be one of, without spoiling it, how am I going to put this? You're going to
Shocking.
see the destruction of, and that's where it goes.
And when you get around to the America's Elite, 36 issue run after, that further evolves and spins that same character in a direction that was unfathomable and unrecognizable, yet all the same sympathetic.
This 43 issue run, honest to goodness, you could put this in a Netflix series and it would get people to watch it because it's a compelling story. Not just, don't be scared to base it as GI Joe, but tell this story because it has human interest and actual human problems and human tragedy in it. And that's what viewers attach to. You're sucked in. You feel for them. You feel their pain. You feel their joy. You feel love. You feel loss. This is the kind of stuff that Hasbro needs to go. If we're going to do a TV show, it's got to be something like this.
100%. A little bit like what they did with G.I. Joe Resolute, but even more so in an ongoing tale kind of fashion. That is what they could accomplish with this. Like, there is some greatness to be had here if they follow this formula.
Yeah, because I mean, it was a comic book. When I saw this and we started talking after this, and I'm like, I found these online. I could read them for free. This is amazing. I literally read through all 43 issues in like a day and a half because I was just,
Oh my goodness.
because I was like, oh no, I need to know what happens. I need to know what happens. And this, like I said, it would be perfect for Netflix because if this is like 10 episodes, you just binge watch this thing and you're like,
Oh yeah.
damn, I gotta watch this again.
Yeah.
The one thing that
Definitely.
has frustrated me, I think, the most with Hasbro and how they've handled the Joe Entertainment is they've had so many amazing stories through the comics and even through Sunbow, but through the comics that they could have adapted that would have brought more people into the brand, made them want to know more about them, and really showed how great these characters truly are.
How great they are, how great they could be, the potential. And that's another thing is, I think a lot of us grew up with Cobra Commander as the bumbling buffoon with the screechy Starscream voice. And I know Hama wrote him differently, but for a lot of people who didn't get to experience the Hama run, but were old enough to experience this Devil's Due or IDW or Resolute, they would learn to appreciate the more serious Cobra Commander.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always joke, the GI Joe team was like the real Justice League. They weren't superheroes; they were real people. And Cobra was like the Legion of Doom
Yes.
because you had Cobra Commander, you had Zartan, Destro, Baroness, the Crimson Twins, on and on. Doctor Mindbender, Firefly, Major Blood. You had all of these people on the Cobra side who were really out for themselves, but were working together until they could screw each other over.
Pretty much.
And they
Yeah,
were
actually, that's
evil and
exactly it.
Destro, I think, is one of the most underrated characters in the whole run because he had basically his own army. And during the Cobra Civil War, how he played everybody was just so smart.
You're talking about the original Hama Cobra Civil War, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah,
But
because
the
I know there was another Civil
IDW,
War. I was gonna say there was
yeah,
another one after.
and that one is a great run too, because it's a little bit of a different story, and it changed up how Cobra really worked. It was like Cobra Commander was not a person, but a title. And
Yeah,
different people rose to that mantle.
that's a great way
And
to put it.
it, and it would make more sense because what's more scary, what's scarier to think it's not one man, but it's a number of different people, and they all bring some sort of deficit to that role.
Hmm. Um, I remember, like, I never got into those specific issues, but I do remember reading about that. Um, IDW, I've probably underserved it myself because I've only read a handful of issues, and the Hama run originally, I read the first 10 plus what I've read as a kid. Um, Part of me still wants to know how well the Devil's Due run stacks up to the rest of the Hama initial run and IDW. Um, I'd be curious to know, as someone who's read it all or most of it, Ryan.
The
Where do I go
IDW,
next?
yeah, the Hammer run is a continuation of A Real American Hero. So it's it's home. It's comfortable. It's I don't want to say predictable, but it's something that just makes me feel good. Where like the Chuckles, that run that for him, that I'm just like, holy crap, this is great storytelling. The second Cobra Civil War and how that all played out, I'm like, son of a gun, this is amazing too. And there's just more and more of those sub team type runs in the IDW series that are almost just like the Devil's Due, where they don't get enough run because it's not the mainstream.
That's right. And um, I just got to know where to go next because I do know that Hama's run continues with issue 155 and a half. I remember reading that issue, but not having enough context for how the original run ended. I'm tempted to do one of two things: either continue the original Hama run or snip through IDW, because I've heard that IDW didn't have a consistent enough writing team. Maybe I'm wrong, outside of Hama. So it felt disjointed. It's what someone else told me, but those aren't my words. That's just me reciting it here.
I don't think it felt disjointed. I think it just took him a little bit of time to get through, to get back onto where he wanted to go. The best series that I have found, it's called the GI Joe, and then Cobra, and it was 12 issues from IDW, and it's the Chuckles issues, but it puts Serpentor as more of like a cult leader, which was
Yep,
so smart.
with the coil. Yep.
Yep. And then I also like enjoyed the GI Joe Origins run, which kind of
I
gave you a little
have
bit more.
some of those issues because the Zartan is very interesting in the Origins run.
Yes, I love the Devil's Due run of Zartan. I actually own those comics, all four of them with the extended cover, just because I'm a huge Zartan slappy.
Mm-hmm,
But the Origins, that's a great run of comics.
mm-hmm.
The Cobra Civil War, that was just Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss.
Who
Um,
who was involved in the Cobra Civil War? Like who was whose side versus whose side?
it's based off of the kind of original run, but
Mm-hmm.
it brings in new characters to, so it kind of falls after the Chuckles run,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm going to spoil it for everybody. Chuckles kills the Cobra Commander. The
Mm-hmm.
Civil War is for that next mantle of who's going to take over that.
As the new Cobra Commander. Okay.
Correct. And there's also a sub one. It's the Cobra Civil War Snake Eyes, which adds a little bit more to the Snake Eyes Storm Shadow story and helps continue that Cobra Civil War, which gives it just more. It expands that, it gives you that full picture, so you get a better, clear understanding of it. But it was some of the best writing that I had seen, and it was geared more to the adult, and they took more chances because they knew they could. I think Larry, to a point, is he can't do everything that he wants to because it goes back to it's safe, it's what we know. Don't color outside of the lines. Give us what we want.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the other things, just those other series was just like, this is what you need. But they're out there so you can read them. So I mean, but
Well,
still.
yeah, and the way Devils do went about some form of Cobra Civil War, as you probably remember, is they pitted Cobra Commander and Serpentor against one another again. Right. That's the way they did it with the coil and with the
Yeah.
clone of Serpentor becoming the new Serpentor. And the way Devils did it is basically Serpentor is a mantle. Right. Now it's a mantle among a series of clones, but it's a mantle nonetheless. So
That was
yeah.
one of the only parts that I'm just like, but having those kids have
Yep.
that psychic bond, and that was kind of cool, but it's like, oh, are we doing this again?
I know the
Just
whole clone thing. It's been played out in Spider-Man so much already.
when they brought in the Red Shadows, I'm like,
Yep.
damn, what a great way of bringing in a new enemy, and what they did to keep themselves hidden. I'm like, that's amazing.
There's
Absolutely
that,
amazing.
and the fact that Red Shadows was not tied in any way, shape, or form to the Action Force Red Shadows was completely different. That was cool. They approached it in such a different way.
It's almost sad that with everything that happened with Image Comics, with Devil's Due, with Hasbro, and how it ended, it was sad because I think they put out a lot of great content. Just as you said earlier, it just, the comics as a whole was not, they weren't selling, and it was just a very down time for that whole industry. And it's probably some of the best work that's out there. Just
Mm-hmm.
amazing.
Well, I'm looking at it right now. Devil's Due, founded in 1999, so they started this run like 2 years after they were founded. That's it.
And I think that's why they did such a good job with it, because they weren't scared to try something new, because it's like, we're we're so, we don't care, because we might not be here tomorrow because we just started. We don't have 75 years of history that we have to hold up like DC or Marvel, or some of these other comics where they can't ruin the history or the track record from the past, where they were just like, we're going to do it our way, and the hell with what anybody else thinks.
Well, if you look, that there are Devil's Due did so many different sub runs too. Like they did Master and Apprentice with Snake Eyes and Kamakura. They did Master and Apprentice 2 with Storm Shadow and his apprentice. They did a Snake Eyes Declassified story, which was about his origin story. That's another one to potentially revisit. Snake Eyes Declassified. That was a great run. I think you said you got the Dreadnonks Declassified series there. I haven't read that one yet.
Oh, the way they created their vision of the backstory for Zartan was amazing.
Yeah.
He's my favorite character out of all of them. I don't know what drew me to him. It could have been the color changing feature as a kid. I thought it was cool, but it was the file card. That story. Go ahead.
Yep. No. I'm just saying. I agree. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
The schizophrenic. It was like he was more relatable than some of the other ones. He was dangerous, and it was just awesome. And
I like the mystery. I like the mystery surrounding Zartan, and yet he was able to get this cult of bikers around him. That's what I liked about him. There was so much. There's so much we could talk about here. I'm just thinking about the dark sides of other characters. I'll spoil one little thing for you. General Hawk. I mean, you know what happens to him during the Devil's Due run.
Yes.
Right. In that second half, in the America's Elite run, he's a little bit crazy because of what happens to him. He's not normal anymore, and Joe Colton has to take over the Joe team.
Yep.
Duke goes on his own again, does something of a Black Ops mission, and can't remember who it is. The General Hawk knows about it, and somebody goes to him and says, "You know what? We know you know where Duke went. You have to tell us." And General Hawk is a little standoffish, doesn't really want to answer, gives them some coordinates. They follow up on the coordinates. Colton sends a team. Stalker and the crew jump down. They go to the holding cell where Duke's supposed to be, and instead of Duke being there, it's a beat up, shackled up Spirit. It's Spirit instead. And the reaction is, that ain't Duke. And they're like, no, but it's still one of ours. Let's take him. And so they grab Spirit, who's been malnourished and beat up for who knows how long. And they try to report back to General Colton as like, was the mission a success? And they're like, that really depends on what you mean success. We didn't recover Duke. We still don't know where he is, but we did discover someone else who was MIA. And I thought that was kind of a cool moment in the America's Elite run.
Yes, it was. And what happens to Hawk and who they think they have is two different things as well, without spoiling it.
Yep.
And it just shows that character that we're both thinking about, how treacherous he truly is and how amazing he is. And the other thing with Devil's Due is what we forget is Kamakura came through, which is Wade. They introduced Zaina, Zartan's daughter.
Yeah.
They did introduce a number of new characters too. And they're popular characters even today.
Yes.
Yeah, it's, even with how Zartan, the sickness he had from his camouflaging color change feature made him sick, and it caused him to kind of have to pull away from his everyday duties where Zaina had filled in. Zorana, took a different attitude, and then the Dreadnonks, of course, just exploded.
Yes, they did. They became a big thing. And
yeah,
you're right.
Go ahead.
Their army. You're right.
Yeah,
Devils do introduces Kamakura, and I always say that that was the best introduction. But a lot of people would say no, Zanya. That's the big introduction. Dreadnonk, daughter of Zartan. That's pretty
yeah,
big,
and
right? Um,
and it killed off his brother to a point.
yeah, to a point. I can't remember whether he stays dead or not, but yeah, it's a comic book. Nothing. No one's ever dead for good, right?
Well, it finally did something with Xandar.
It did.
You
It
know,
did.
and it showed how he could be manipulated so easily, and then of course when the big reveal happens, it's like, son of a gun. But yeah, it was very underrated series. If folks get a chance, go and read it. It's worth it. Is it not part of canon now? Who cares? It's a great story. It's going to give you a different impression of some of your favorite Joes. It's going to give you depth to characters that didn't have depth before. It makes you want to see them succeed due to the flaws that all of them have. And it actually sometimes makes you want to cheer for Cobra because you want to see there's them succeed, or at least get out on their own.
It
So
does. It does. I mean, we can't say enough good things about this sort of thing. And the good thing about it is it's self-contained enough. Like you read the initial 43 issues. If you want more, then you continue with the 36 issue America's Elite,
yep.
or you go to the 16 issue Frontline, or you go back to the Snake Eyes Declassified or the Kamakura issues. Whatever they are, you have options. But the 43 issue main run will give you so much that you'll be curious for more, but you'll also be satisfied with those 43 issues. It's not
Well,
that bad.
we
For a comic
forget.
run, not that bad.
No, and we forget Destro's son is introduced.
Oh my goodness, Alexander is introduced. That's correct.
And I mean, if you really think about it, that helps perpetuate that bloodline not only for Zartan but also for Destro, and it helps build that treacherous family dynamic because you know Alexander's not Baroness's son, so he's out to prove himself, and he does some pretty shady shit. And to
He
tie
does
into
it.
your dark side,
Yeah. Sorry, to tie in Dark Side of Duke. What?
well, that Destro at the time was not Destro. Am I right?
Um,
Yeah.
that's correct. So when Alexander comes into the story, his impact is felt right away. Like one of the earliest things is Destro's son and what he does to kind of shake up everything. You're right. He has a very huge early impact in the Devil's Due run. That's a character I need to introduce on my channel. Destro the Second.
Yes, because he was just out to prove that he could do what his father couldn't. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he literally threw the grenade or the monkey wrench, whatever you want to call it, in the middle of everything and just shook up the entire Cobra organization.
Yes. Oh, it's a real skeletons in the closet kind of thing for Destro. How you find out it's his son that's been doing these things all along.
Yep.
I was about to say that should be the name of an episode, of a video, Skeletons in the Closet, but that was actually the name of an actual Sunbow episode way back when.
It was, yes. Lady J and Destro, as a matter of fact.
Apparently, yeah. So it probably would just get people thinking that, oh, he's just going to air that episode. Then they're going to just dislike it if they find out, no, you're busy talking about Destro's son. I'll find a title. I'll find a title that works. You know me. I'll get a title that hooks people in.
But that goes back again to what I was saying. Like, Hasbro or Hulu, Netflix, whoever, look at this run of comic books. This is literally a male soap opera.
Yep.
It, it's perfect for television.
Yep.
Take
It's
this,
gonna work.
run.
I wonder who has the rights to the story. Like, do they got to go through somebody? I'm not sure. You
Well, it's
know.
got to be Hasbro. They got to own it because I know they were owed a lot of money by this publisher that they never received for the royalties. So they have to have this somewhere that they own.
Oh, when you say this
Right.
publisher, you're talking about Devil's Due never paid never paid royalties to Hasbro enough, or what are you talking about something else?
No, it was millions of dollars that was still owed when everything shut down and they moved it over to IDW.
Really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And I found out most of that after, I researched it after I read through it. I'm like, why did they leave? I'm like, oh, okay. And that's how, it sounded like that's why IDW was kind of chosen, is because they knew they weren't going to get stooched over for any of the royalties that they would be owed for
Oh,
the
okay.
comics.
Okay, because you know what? I didn't even think to look into that, because when you get to America's Elite, it ends in a way that looks like Devil's Due ended the run on their own terms. It feels that way. Whereas when Dreamwave had to drop Transformers or had it taken away from them, they dropped in the middle of a run, in the middle of multiple runs, to be honest with you, because they had an Optimus Prime origin story that did not finish its third arc. The first arc still has a lot of influence today, but the third arc did not finish, and the ongoing Transformer series did not finish. But Devil's Due G.I. Joe came to a satisfactory conclusion. So for some reason, I thought they lost the rights and didn't renew them. I didn't realize that they owed Hasbro money.
Yeah, and I think it was for both, because I think whoever owned or was publishing all of this was the one that owed Hasbro the money, and I believe it
Okay.
was for both GI Joe and
No,
Transformers.
oh, you know what? You might be thinking of Dreamwave Productions, because Transformers and GI Joe were not both under the same publisher. After Marvel, DDP, well, Image slash DDP. I think it was Image first because DDP was an imprint. They got GI Joe. Transformers was under Dreamwave, and then both ended up under IDW later on. So I think you're thinking of Dreamwave and
No,
Transformers being owed money.
then it was they owed for Joe,
They were still
because
owed for Joe. Okay. All right. Wow, that surprised me, because it comes to a fitting conclusion. Like, it doesn't end in a, oh, they got it pulled or they ran out of budget. It ends in a satisfactory manner.
maybe they were given like, hey, you're gonna lose the license on this date,
That's
and they're
exactly what
like,
they were given. We were told when they were going to lose the license. So that's why the story for IDW, sorry, for Devil's Due, they ended with a 12-part arc called World War III.
yep,
And it basically comes down to, and I'll just tell you, because I'm not going to tell you how the whole thing ends, but I will tell you the start of that final 12-parter, which is, in order to secure the Baroness and their child back, not Alexander, but another child, Destro has to either choose them or to give up Mars Industries to Cobra Commander. He chooses
oh,
to give up Mars Industries to Cobra Commander. So not only is Cobra Commander the one with the largest terrorist organization in the world, he now has control of all the armaments of Mars. That enables him to begin World War III.
yep, but
And then all the reservist Joes, like if you've seen the IDW issue that Adam Riches did the cover of, that shows the Terrordrome and all the Cobra forces, every single character from Cobra on a 2-page scan, on a 2-page splash.
yes,
There's the equivalent one you've probably seen that has all the Joes. That was the issue 1 of World War III of Devil's Due, or issue 25 of America's Elite, depending how you look at it.
now I
That's where
gotta
that
find
comes from,
too.
because they activate every reservist from the Joes to combat World War III and Cobra Commander's control of Mars Industries. Imagine that.
I can, because Destro would choose his family over power.
Yes.
That's
Yes. And that's an intense scene because Alexander is pleading with his father. If I recall correctly, God, I'm not as familiar with the America's Elite run as I am with the first run, but I could have swore Alexander saying, "Don't do it." And he's like, "I don't have a choice, Alexander. Right?
yep.
You're going to kill your sibling and your stepmom. What do you want me to do?" So he did it. He handed over Mars to Cobra Commander. That part I remember.
And see, that's a great way to then escalate the story.
It is. And that's where the final 12 parts just goes for full blown explosion. Like, oh my God.
I'm going to the comic store tomorrow. I'm going to go look for him. I'll find him.
Sorry about that. I keep making you spend
No,
money.
don't. When you can find good stuff to read or good stories that you just, you'll digest so quick, it's so worth it. I love comics because it makes me think, I become creative. Part of the reason with the Dark Side of Duke is, I created this sub team of Joes where they're, jungle troopers, basically. I'm ripping off parts of Predator, but it's also looking at, this is my Joe assassination team. They're going to go in and take out high value targets. And that's cool to me because I think that's what some of these Joe guys would do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anyway.
Thanks again, everyone, for coming to the island. I want to thank Toy Kennections, Ken from Toy Kennections especially, for putting together this great The Dark Side of Duke. Get out there, check it out, read comics, find new stories that inspire you, go do something that's fun. Ken, any parting words?
Just thanks for all the support, Ryan, and for this amazing network we've been building around there. Shout out everybody, but they know who they are.
Yep. Again, thank you, everyone. All my boys on the Island of Misfit Toy Collectors. Remember, this island